Somewhere in the silence between childhood ambition and adult exhaustion, something disappears. It is not just energy. It is not just time. It is the thread, the internal thread, that once made your actions feel connected to something real, something meaningful. When Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how," he was not delivering a motivational poster quote. He was describing the machinery of the soul, that without a why, a center, the rest of the organism collapses, slowly, quietly, under the surface. And yet, today, when people say they have lost motivation, they rarely mean they do not have a purpose. They mean they do not feel anything anymore when they try to act. They mean that the very mechanism that used to link action with meaning is now rusted through. Let us not pretend this is new. Nietzsche saw it over a century ago, people drowning not in hardship but in hollowness. The greatest danger that always hovered over humanity, he wrote, and still hovers over it, is the eruption of meaninglessness. This is where your lost motivation begins, not in laziness, not in a lack of goals, but in a quiet disconnection between the self and the structure that once told it who it was and what it was for. The world was never built to preserve your meaning. It was built to preserve itself. Your function within it was meant to serve its survival, not your self-actualization. And when Nietzsche spoke of the death of God, he was not talking about theology. He meant the collapse of a unifying center, the story that once gave people a reason to keep going even when life hurt. Without that center, we turn to surrogates, productivity, performance, progress. We chase small wins and external validation because they give us temporary spikes of significance. But they do not restore the thread. They merely distract us from its absence. Here is where the common motivational industry fails. It tells you to push harder, wake up earlier, grind more. But Nietzsche would say, this is violence against a fragmented soul. It is demanding output from a person who has not yet reassembled their reason to live. Man does not strive for happiness, he wrote. Only the Englishman does that. What he meant was this: humans do not need ease or pleasure. They need a reason to suffer. Without that reason, every small difficulty becomes unbearable. With that reason, even agony can feel dignified. So what happened? You did not lose motivation. You lost coherence. You lost the sense that what you are doing is connected to who you are. And that loss is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. The structure of modern life breaks the thread by design. You are told from a young age what to do, what to value, how to behave. You are measured by standards you did not choose, graded, ranked, approved or corrected. Eventually you stop asking what you want and begin chasing what is rewarded. But the soul remembers. There is a part of you that resists. That part starts whispering first, in your boredom, in your irritation, in your procrastination. Then it grows louder. Disengagement, cynicism, numbness, and finally, collapse. The inability to move, not because you are weak, but because motion without meaning is a kind of soul suicide, and something inside you refuses to participate in your own erasure. Nietzsche saw this too. He called it ressentiment, the silent rebellion of those who are told what to value but secretly refuse it. Instead of creating their own values, they learn to mock or undermine others. But it is not malice, it is starvation. And like all starving things, it turns desperate. You do not need a new goal. You need a new thread. But what does that even mean? What does it look like in real life, this slow unraveling? Let me tell you about a friend of mine. Let us call him John. In his 20s, he had a clear trajectory. Top of his class. Engineering degree. Job lined up in a major firm. Everything tracked. Everyone was proud of him. But 3 years in, something started to dim. He could not explain it. Nothing had gone wrong. There was no apparent crisis. No trauma. Just a growing detachment. He would sit at his desk staring at the screen, unable to start. He took longer breaks. Started coming in late. Called it burnout. His boss suggested a vacation. But the problem was not energy, it was meaning. Years later, he told me the moment it all snapped was when he was promoted. He walked out of the meeting, sat in his car, and cried. Not from joy, but from despair, because it hit him. He did not want any of this. He had built his life toward a future he did not believe in anymore. The thread had been gone for years. He was just now noticing. This is not unique. I once knew a woman, quiet, brilliant, trained in classical piano. Her father pushed her into performance competitions her whole childhood. She won. A lot. Conservatory followed. Standing ovations. Applause. But she told me she had not felt anything while playing since she was 17. The music had become a cage. She kept going until one night mid-performance she stopped. In the middle of the piece. Walked off stage. Never returned. She became a barista in a quiet town. People said she had wasted her talent. But I saw something else. For the first time, she was living on her own terms, slowly rebuilding her thread. These are not stories of failure. They are stories of recalibration, of people who, like Nietzsche, understood that sometimes collapse is a kind of integrity. It is the soul refusing to continue performing when the script no longer fits. And yes, it is terrifying, because meaning is not something you download. It is something you build, brick by brick, act by act. And that process is painful, lonely, ambiguous, but it is real. And here is Nietzsche's gift. He does not offer comfort. He offers clarity. He tells us that meaning must be created, not inherited. That the death of old systems is not the end, but the beginning of something more honest. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. This is where many break. They want the goal. They want certainty. But Nietzsche says, no, you are a bridge between what you were and what you must become, between the inherited and the created. The bridge is fragile, unstable, but it is the only path forward. But what does it mean to be a bridge? Not in theory, but in flesh. It means to stand between two truths, with neither offering solid ground. The old meaning is gone. You can no longer return to what once gave you purpose. But the new meaning has not yet formed. You are suspended in ambiguity. You wake, you move, you breathe, but nothing feels inhabited. It is not despair, but profound disorientation. And in this in-between, the danger is not death. It is numbness. Nietzsche saw this risk clearly. He knew that when the inherited systems collapse, religion, tradition, roles, we do not leap immediately into freedom. We hesitate. We falter. The soul diminishes. We try to mimic old rituals or overcompensate with new distractions, but the weight does not lift, because it is not about activity. It is about depth. A void of meaning cannot be filled with motion, only with truth. And truth at this stage is rarely comforting. This is the point at which many turn away. They call it burnout or existential fatigue. They think something is wrong with them. But the fatigue is not dysfunction. It is clarity. It is the body and mind refusing to move in service of what no longer matters. I once knew a man who embodied this moment perfectly. His name was Elias, a brilliant mathematician who, after nearly a decade of immersion in symbolic abstraction, woke up one morning and simply stopped caring, either out of depression or failure, but because he had come to see the entire process as meaningless. It is all elegant nonsense, he told me. I prove theorems that never touch life. This was not burnout. It was a confrontation with his own truth. He felt that his life's work was devoid of soul. And once that realization entered his bones, no amount of discipline or achievement could resuscitate his former drive. Nietzsche's diagnosis here is cruelly accurate. He said that man can endure almost any how if he has a why. But remove the why, and no structure of habit, no system of goals, no external reward will sustain you. The body might keep moving, but the spirit exits the scene. We call it fatigue, but it is not physical. It is metaphysical. It is not tiredness from exertion. It is the weight of meaninglessness, of continuing without conviction. of climbing without knowing if the summit exists or if it matters at all. This is where many break, not because they are weak, but because they were taught to live for symbols, money, reputation, productivity, instead of essence. And when those symbols no longer seduce, there is nothing left but silence. And yet, in that silence, something begins. The superficial motivation that once moved you, praise, applause, forward momentum, loses its grip. You find yourself stripped bare. This is not failure. It is exposure. You are face to face with your own life, not the narrative, but the experience. And this is the moment Nietzsche considered sacred, not because it is pleasant, but because it is honest. From here, one either collapses inward, retreating into numbness, cynicism, or distraction, or one begins, painfully, to reassemble a life that is one's own, not inherited, not adopted, not performed, but authored. The transition from inherited meaning to authored meaning is brutal. It requires the death of every false certainty. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has been bitten by the snake of knowledge can never return to the innocence of ignorance." You cannot unsee the falsity of the life you were sold, and yet you still have to live. So what now? This is where his idea of the yes becomes essential. Not a blind affirmation of life's pleasures, but a willing embrace of its difficulty. The yes is a stance, a decision to carry the weight of being despite its pain, because to not do so would be a betrayal of one's potential. Nietzsche was not advocating optimism. He was calling for courage. The courage to affirm life even when it does not affirm you, even when it withholds clarity, justice, or peace. And here is where something remarkable begins to stir. Once you stop looking outward for your justification, for applause, validation, or instruction, you begin to hear the quiet murmur of your own will. Faint at first, but real. And this will, this inner directive, is not built from slogans or ideologies. It is your own, shaped by your experiences, your wounds, your insights. It does not shout. It does not beg. It calls. When Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, he was not describing a tyrant or an ideal man. He was describing someone who creates values, who lives from the inside out, who does not wait for permission to exist meaningfully. Most people wait for a signal, for approval, for the pain to stop. But the ones who rise do so in defiance of the waiting. They say, "I will act even without clarity. I will choose even without certainty. I will become even in the absence of encouragement." This is not arrogance. It is necessity. To live as a self, not as a shadow. And it requires something far greater than motivation. It requires a sense of direction, born from confrontation with the void. Nietzsche never offered comfort. He offered fire. He wanted your spirit ignited, not sedated. In modern terms, we talk of burnout, depression, apathy. But often these are just names we give to the symptoms of meaning deprivation. A man wakes up and cannot move, not because he is lazy, but because every motion he has been trained to perform now feels fraudulent. He cannot play the game anymore, but he has not yet learned how to create a new one. This is the crisis, and also the opportunity. Because in this void you are finally free. Not because anything is given, but because everything may now be chosen. I once met a woman, Helen, who had built an entire career around helping others. A therapist, widely respected, financially secure. And yet at 47, she confessed to me that she no longer believed in what she was doing. Not because therapy was useless, but because she realized she had built her practice to please her father, who had always admired healers. It was not her calling. It was her inheritance. She could not go on, but neither could she just stop. So she lingered, quietly despairing, until one day she sold her practice and disappeared into rural Greece. 2 years later, I received a letter from her. She was working as a translator of obscure philosophical texts, living modestly, and finally felt honest in her life. "I have less," she wrote, "but I no longer feel like a ghost in my own story." This is the turn. From a life of performance to a life of presence. From the pursuit of meaning to the embodiment of meaning. And it is terrifying, because it strips you of every excuse. Once you realize you are the author, you also realize the terrifying weight of that authorship. You cannot blame the world for what you refuse to create. But you also gain something immeasurable: dignity. The dignity of self-chosen struggle. The dignity of living a story that, even if it fails by external standards, is truly yours. Nietzsche's life was not a happy one, but it was an honest one, and his legacy is not comfort, it is permission. Permission to hurt, to doubt, to fall, but above all, permission to build something sacred from the wreckage. If you are here reading this, chances are you have already felt the collapse of the old motivations, the drive to succeed for others, the hunger for status, the compulsion to be good in someone else's narrative. And now you stand in a clearing, empty but full of potential. You do not need to be certain. You do not need to be strong. You only need to be willing to take the next step without applause. Because in the silence left by abandoned scripts, a new voice can emerge. Yours. And that voice, once discovered, once trusted, will carry you further than any system, any ideology ever could. So begin, not with motivation, but with truth. If this presentation prompted you to reflect on yourself, please like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming mental resets. We have an extensive journey ahead, and we are here to guide you as you begin your mindset transformation. Our next video will be Nietzsche, How to Suffer Without Falling Apart. The secret isn't avoidance, it's transformation.